Hello, Dr. Kit Slice here, psychologist and life coach, and I'm here to hopefully inspire your confidence, your self-compassion, and your growth. And growth is the theme for me this month. Here we are, spring has officially sprung this time of year if you're in the northern hemisphere. And so that's why I'm letting this the month of March be this theme of growth, birth, renewal. Remember that you are like the acorn growing into a great big mighty oak tree. You are pre-programmed to grow. You are programmed to know how to grow, to instinctively do that, right? And what can happen though is that here we are moseying along, growing, getting some self-awareness, feeling like we're doing the things, we're working towards a goal. We are understanding ourselves and acting in alignment with our values, and life feels good. And then whammo bammo, something gets in our way and it completely derails us. So that's what I want to talk about today is adversity in the face of growth. Last week, I talked about fear, which is something that can get in the way of growth. But this week, I want to talk about other things that get in the way of our growth, sort of the weeds, if you will, that maybe compete for your energy. You, the mighty oak tree, maybe you're starting out as a seedling and that's how you feel, but either way, or other trees or other things that can compete with our growth. That's what we want to talk about today. And so, of course, there are actual setbacks that can happen to us. Um, you know, things that are just outside of our control, financial setbacks, health setbacks, just a variety of things that can go wrong in life, right? And so that's not what I'm talking about today. Those are the things that are out of our control. We get to let go of those because those can happen to us regardless. But what we do have control over, what I do want to talk about today, is the reaction that we have to those things, to setbacks, to adversity, to the things that can go wrong. And so, because those are things that we do have control over. And in particular, I want to talk about the stories that we tell ourselves and limiting beliefs that we have. So let me start with the stories that we tell ourselves. Maybe you're not aware, but our brains love to tell us stories. And our brain is actually particularly good at putting a nice negative spin on the stories that we tell ourselves about what's happening in our lives or about who we are as a person. Okay. And that negative spin that our brain puts on this, it's a survival mechanism, right? Millions of years ago, our brain had to prioritize negative information. It had to prioritize information about how that lion ate cousin Bob or whatever, and to remember all the scary negative things about that so that the same thing didn't happen to us. So our brain has that tendency to prioritize negative information. If you are feeling stressed, anxious, any kind of quote unquote negative emotional state. They're not, I don't like to use the term negative, but that's how people often identify with those emotional states. Then your brain is going to be even better at putting that negative spin on things. But remember that it's a survival mechanism. Your brain is trying to protect you. And so why am I telling you this? It's because when we have awareness around the negative spin, it's easy to identify that that is a story our brain is telling us and isn't necessarily true, and that that story may be holding us back from our growth. It is a weed that we need to identify and take out from our garden. Okay. One example of one way that we can tell negative stories to ourselves is something that's called a cognitive distortion. Cognitive distortions are just like it sounds, a way of thinking about something that sort of distorts things, distorts it from reality. So I'm going to give you some examples of cognitive distortions. You can Google this because there's a lot of cognitive distortions out there. And the goal here is awareness. So you want to learn about what some of the typical cognitive distortions are to identify if that's something that you are doing. So one cognitive distortion is something called all or nothing thinking. So an example of this might be you fail at one thing, and the cognitive distortion that you have is because it's like, okay, because I failed at one thing, that now I'm going to fail at everything I try. That is all or nothing thinking. There's no gray in between where some things you try are successful and some things you try just don't work out for whatever reason. Another example of a cognitive distortion is catastrophic thinking. This is where when something starts to go wrong and you spiral into how this is the end of the world, essentially. Maybe you don't go that far down the spiral, but you do spiral it out of control. You make that mountain out of a molehill. The antidote to the catastrophic thinking is to be realistic about the implications of whatever has gone wrong. Is this something that is going to ruin everything? Or is there some problem solving I can do around this? Yeah, okay, maybe this is a hard thing to deal with, but realistically, here's all the options of the ways that I can deal with this. I used to do catastrophic thinking and all or nothing thinking all the time. And I remember I years ago in my early 20s, I had been working with a therapist who was helping me identify these things. I remember the exact moment where I was like, holy Toledo, I could go way into catastrophic thinking right now, or I could be more realistic. It was when I was in community college, I was in art school, and I was applying to four-year universities. I was trying to transfer, and I had sort of put all my eggs in one basket. The counselor at my community college had sort of said, everyone goes on this path from this community college to a state school that I had applied to. And they sort of made it seem like it was in the basket. And so that's what I believed. It just turns out that was the first year of these major budget cuts that had happened, and they completely revamped their process of accepting students. And because I had out of state credits, I did not get into that school. And I remember I was sitting in class when I got this notification. And so my heart sank, and I immediately went into it was actually some all or nothing thinking and some catastrophic thinking of like, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm never going to go to college. And this is sort of the end of my life. Like, what am I going to do? There's no other options. And I remember identifying that thought in the moment, and my complete energy level just changed. And rather than letting the catastrophic thinking take hold of me, I went into problem solving instead and realized, like, okay, maybe I need to explore, are there schools who are still accepting applications for transfer? And lo and behold, that's what I did. And I was able to finish my degree. I had to move to another city. It was hard, it was tough, but I was able to do it. And I didn't let that thinking impede my growth. Okay. So moving on to some other cognitive distortions. Another one is discounting the positive. This is where you've already made some progress, you've had some success, you've grown in some way. And rather than attributing it to something that you did, something that was in your control, you contribute it completely to luck or outside circumstances. And so the antidote to this one is to take count of things that go well in your life and what was your role in it. It may be true that there were other factors that played a role in it, but you had a role in some aspect of it. Um, Emotional reasoning is another really common cognitive distortion. This is where you sort of use your emotions to reason yourself out of something that isn't realistic. So for example, I feel like I'm not successful or I can't be successful, so therefore I'm not, nor will I ever be. And the antidote to this is to look for evidence. What is some evidence that you are a success or you have done successful things in your life already? A really common cognitive distortion that I see with my folks, especially for folks who are like people pleasers, is mind reading, where we assume that we know what another person is thinking or feeling. Maybe somebody had like a gruff tone of voice, and we just sort of assume, oh, they're having a reaction to that sort of offhand comment that I knew I shouldn't have made 5 days ago or something like that, right? And the reality, like maybe the reality is that they're like, Starbucks order was wrong that morning and they're just not in a good mood for that reason. We have no idea. So the antidote to this one is, when you notice that you're mind reading, first of all, you're not a mind reader unless there's some amazing power that you have, which is highly unlikely. You're not a mind reader, and you get to ask for clarification. Hey, I'm noticing that you seem like you're not in the best mood. Is there anything that I should know or anything I can do? Just ask, check in. Okay. Um, Here's the big one. Should statements. These are huge cognitive distortions, and we call this shoulding all over ourselves. You need to notice if you're shoulding all over yourselves, because where should statements come from, these come from typically rules that we have that are usually arbitrary rules. They're rules about how we feel like things ought to be or should be in our life, that there's no reason for that to be the case. So a good example, maybe I have a rule that like my house needs to be clean all the time, 24/7. And that leads to should statements of I should be cleaning right now and having that thought all the time. And that just leads to stress and anxiety and unrealistic expectations. So the antidote to should statements are, you replace your should with would like. I would like to be cleaning my house right now, and I would like it to be clean all the time. And it's okay that it's not all the time. It's clean some of the time, and that's okay. Okay, so these are examples of cognitive distortions. Again, just be aware, learn about them, be aware of when you're doing it. Awareness is key. Notice when you're doing it, maybe thank your brain. Hey, thank you, brain, for this negative story that you're trying to spin right now. I know you're trying to protect me, and then reframe it, examine it. Is this thing true? Do you need to be thinking that way? Use some of the specific antidotes I mentioned and ask yourself if there's a healthier, more balanced perspective that you can be taking. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about, some of these weeds that go in the way, that get in the way of our growth, is limiting beliefs. And limiting beliefs, they may be a driver of some of the stories that you tell yourself. What limiting beliefs do is they keep us from being the person that we are meant to be. Remember, you are that acorn growing into the mighty oak tree. You are meant to be growing and doing wonderful things and being the amazing person that you are, underneath perhaps some of the limiting beliefs that you have about yourself or about the world. And more than that, limiting beliefs, the impact that they have on us is they are things that we believe to be absolutely true, again, about us or about the world. And because we have this belief, it may stop us from taking action. So they become self-fulfilling in a way. And so again, we want to have awareness around those limiting beliefs. We want to identify them. Ways to identify them, maybe look at your goals and what they are and ask yourself, what do you believe about yourself in relation to that? What do you believe about maybe things that keep you from achieving your goals or your success? Ask other people if they notice things about you. Some keys that there might be a limiting belief there is that a statement of like, oh, I always am this way, or I am never this way, or this always happens to me, or this never happens to me. Or you could also look for excuses maybe that you make for why you don't achieve the goals that you set out to achieve. And one way to frame this might be to think about what other people might say about you in those always never statements. Or you could even ask some people that you feel close to or that you trust, hey, fill in the blank, I'm always or I never, and sort of see what kind of limiting beliefs you can get to that way. So some questions you might ask, like, do you believe that you are worthy of success? Do you believe that you're meant to grow and heal? Do you believe that you could be promoted in your job to your highest level? Do you believe that you're a good parent, a good partner? Do you believe that you are deserving of fill in the blank, money, success, love, whatever that is? So limiting beliefs might be like, I don't deserve these things, right? That's what they kind of sound like. So get awareness around what your limiting beliefs are, and they come from all sorts of places. These might be stories that were told in your family growing up. oh, we aren't meant to have money, or something along those lines. These could come from again, the family, or just things that influenced you growing up is a lot of times where they come from. And then once you get awareness of a limiting belief, the key is to go outside of your comfort zone. And and of course, why would we want to do that? Because it's easy to stay comfortable, but to get past a limiting belief, we do want to challenge that, and that can feel uncomfortable. And then we want to replace a limiting belief with a more realistic belief, and a belief that feels that empowers us instead of limiting you. So let me give you an example. Somebody might have a limiting belief of like, I'm not interesting, so nobody will want to ever date me. And the result of that limiting belief is that that person never goes out and has interesting experiences and doesn't meet interesting people. Because why bother? Why would they bother doing that? They don't believe that they're interesting or have that capacity. And that self-fulfilling aspect comes into play, is that because they have this limiting belief, they never go out and have interesting experiences, and then therefore don't really have a lot of interesting things to share. And so then they don't go on dates because they don't have a lot of interesting stories. So the way to work with this, some people are okay with just identifying that thought and replacing it with a completely opposite thought of like, I am interesting, and so I go out and do interesting things, so that would then therefore lead them to going out and doing more interesting things, and then hopefully lead them to their goal of dating. um, but there's a caveat here. If we just replace that thought, the limiting belief, with a positive thought, sometimes our brain will just want to argue with that, and that is counterproductive. So if you try that and you find yourself just arguing with yourself and looking for all the evidence of how you're not interesting and you'll never meet anybody interesting, don't do that. There is a middle of the road way that you can do that. The thought might, so the thought wants, you want to include something about the thought where you are working on something or you are trying something that leads to some result. Okay, so the thought, instead of I am an interesting person, the thought might be I am working on having more interesting experiences so that I can feel more interesting and meet interesting people. That is something that is more accessible, because it's hard to argue with your brain on that one of I'm working towards this, if that's what you want to be doing. But do you see how that thought can empower somebody to go outside of their comfort zone to do interesting things? Now, it may be super uncomfortable for that person to do that, to go out and do uncomfortable things, but that's okay. That is part of working with limiting beliefs, is it can feel uncomfortable, but can you also see how they get outside of their comfort zone and have interesting experiences? Now, all of a sudden, they're feeling interesting and empowered to either go on dates or have more interesting experiences. Okay, I know that I talked about a lot today, but just to summarize, just these are some ways of working with adversity that can get in the way of your growth. And we're talking about the inside job stuff here. We're not talking about things that happen to you. We're talking about how do you react to that, and how do you work with stories that you tell yourself and the limiting beliefs that you might have that might be keeping you from growing to your full potential. So I hope that this was helpful, and that this helps put you in the spirit of growth and spring and birth and renewal, and just all of the wonderful feelings that come up for you around that, and that you can get excited about working with the adversity to your growth, so that you can continue to grow. And on that note, have a lovely day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.